Hello guys, welcome to another video. Now yesterday we finally received the full reveal for 3.24 Necropolis League, and there's a lot of stuff in there. The league mechanic is going to be a crafting league after all. It looks quite powerful actually. The examples given on the release page contain some very strong modifiers. And patch 3.24 is going to contain a huge amount of endgame improvements, basically further improving the strongest quality of Path of Exile. There's changes to the Atlas passive tree, removal and replacement of systems like sextants, and changes to how you access Uber Pinnacle bosses with the introduction of new Uber boss fragments, which drop exclusively from brand new tier 17 maps, which basically look like they're Uber boss arenas in and of themselves. There's like an Uber boss version of Uhtred. That's the Expedition boss, actually an incredible boss fight, and I'm glad this one is being made into a fight that's going to be seen more often. There's also Uber versions of Lycia and Katarina, I believe, and one of the heist bosses there too from the unique contracts. And as part of this change, they're also splitting the reward pool for the standard Pinnacle bosses and their Uber variants, so that each drop pool is unique to that encounter. And with that, they're adding some new unique items to the game to flesh out the drop pools a little bit more following that change. One of those new uniques is the topic of today's video. That's Ravenous Passion, a new unique helmet that drops from the Uber Eater of Worlds encounter. This helmet has some unique modifiers that change the buffs that Rage provides. Instead of granting increased attack damage, attack speed, and movement speed, with this helmet, Rage will grant increased spell damage, cast speed, and movement speed. This is something players have been asking for a while, a way to convert Rage for use with casters. However, most of the want to convert Rage for spells came because of the existence of the divergent quality Berserk, which provided more spell damage based on quality, and this is now gone from the game as of 3.23, with the new transfigured gem system replacing alternate quality gems. With that said, I think Berserk is still a powerful buff. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So, converting Rage to apply caster buffs instead isn't the only thing that this helmet does, as it also provides a way to generate Rage. Instead of gaining Rage on attacks like a standard Rage build, this helmet grants a chunk of Rage every time 200 mana is spent. And the amount of Rage gained is a roll that can be divined on this helmet. I guess it rolls between 10 and 15, but it could be between 10 and 20. Regardless, a chunk of Rage is gained every time a total of 200 mana is spent. So this doesn't need to be spent in a single cast either. The helmet will track the cost of spent abilities and will provide that chunk of Rage every time you pass the 200 spent threshold. At the base maximum of 50 Rage, you'll gain 50% increased spell damage, 25% increased cast speed, and 10% increased movement speed while using Ravenous Passion. The cast speed here is nice, but these stats are not especially powerful considering the loss of a helmet slot. So when using this, you're going to want to invest quite a lot into Rage. One of the routes I think you could go is to increase maximum Rage as much as possible. There's the Bear's Girdle unique belt, which grants an extra 20 maximum Rage, but the other stats gained from this belt would only really benefit a physical spell build when used in combination with Ravenous Passion. The Berserking notable on the passive skill tree grants an extra 10 maximum Rage, while the Slaughter notable grants an extra 5. But unfortunately, the other stats on these nodes are also lackluster for a caster. The attack speed is nice for movement, but it's not ideal. There's also the unique Axe Rigwald Savagery, which grants a massive 25 extra maximum Rage, but it not only requires you to dual wield with a sword in the other hand, but it also doesn't really provide much of any useful stats aside from the Rage. However, there is the Psychotic Axe base, which is a heist exclusive base type that was actually buffed last league in 3.23 when it went from providing 10 maximum Rage to 20, and that's on the implicit. Despite being an axe, you can actually roll some decent modifiers for spell builds. You can use an Essence to get a desired mod right off the bat, an Essence of Misery will provide cast speed, an Essence of Woe will provide spell damage, or you could use an Essence of Scorn for spell critical chance. There's a few others there too, like Elemental Penetration or flat added damage to spells. And there's a bunch of useful veiled modifiers too, like double damage while focused, and don't forget about influence mods, for example things like a Redeemer modifier which grants a percentage of physical damage as extra cold damage. I think ideally you want to start with an influence base and use essences until you get the correct mod. For example, you could use an Essence of Woe for spell damage, until you get that Fizz as extra cold mod on a Redeemer influenced Psychotic Axe. And you're then going to need to clean it up a bit, lock prefixes and use a new Veiled Orb to hit a nice unveil, like DD or Focus DD, and then finish the craft with a multi-mod. So let's say you're using one of these axes, perhaps you're also using the Bear's Girdle unique belt, and you have Berserking anointed on the passive tree. That would bring your maximum rage up to 100. So now at maximum rage using Ravenous Passion, you'd have 100% increased spell damage, 50% increased cast speed, and 20% increased movement speed. That's a lot better, but if we're talking about scaling rage, we should probably talk about the Berserker. This ascendancy gets an extra 10 maximum rage on the Crave the Slaughter notable, but most important is the notable after this one, Rite of Ruin. This ascendancy notable provides stun immunity at 25 rage and above, whilst tripling the bonuses provided by rage at the cost of life loss based on total rage while not losing rage. So let's take our 100 rage example from earlier, which is now 110 due to Crave the Slaughter. With Rite of Ruin and Ravenous Passion, at 110 maximum rage, you gain 330% increased spell damage, 165% increased cast speed, and 66% increased movement speed. That's insane amounts of cast and movement speed, and a giant chunk of spell damage as well. You will need to solve the life loss from Rite of Ruin. My personal favourite way to do that is the use of Dissolution of the Flesh combined with Eternal Youth. The interaction there is that Eternal Youth's life recharge keeps going even when you take damage, because Dissolution is reserving that life as life reservation instead, which means you easily out-recover the life loss from Rite of Ruin. And in a caster build, you'll be able to combine those mechanics with Petrified Blood and Pain attunement for even more damage. Remember that you can use Forbidden Flame and Flesh Jewels to take Rite of Ruin from the Berserker and use it on a Juggernaut or Chieftain, which will open up even more options for build choices. Now, because the modifiers from Rage are so generic, you could really go in so many different directions with this. You could just go for maxing out the amount of casts you're able to dish out. You could instead go something a bit more duration based like Brands, which scale with the cast speed increase, and even go for something like Chainbreaker, so you're actually not casting very often at all, but you have constant rage generation. You could even do something completely out of the box like a mana stacking Berserker. That sounds crazy and probably not very good, but it might be a lot of fun. I will briefly talk about Berserk, because I think that even though the alternate quality Berserk is gone, this buff is still such a powerful thing to even have access to in any build, even if it doesn't provide damage. Having access to 19% less damage taken, not to mention the movement speed and attack speed modifiers which will help you move around a lot faster too, Berserk is a very strong thing to have if you have good rage generation. And speaking of rage generation, what options are available to you in this regard? There's the modifier on the helmet itself, which we discussed earlier, but you may not want to rely on that. For example, you could be using Eldritch Battery to solve mana cost, or maybe even Life Tap so you're not spending mana. There's Chainbreaker, as I also mentioned, though due to the rage cost added to abilities, this one isn't viable if you want to just spam out a ton of spells. Calm Spirit Unique Gloves is an option for rage generation too, and there's also Warlord's Mark, which provides a chunk of rage on stunning the marked enemy. And there's some shenanigans there with Chains of Emancipation too for rage generation, but this would mean that you're unable to use the Bear's Girdle belt. Overall though, I think this helmet is a really fun addition to the game, and I think it's worthy of an Uber boss drop too. It's going to produce some really fun, unique builds, and I look forward to seeing what people can come up with when using Ravenous Passion. Thank you to my patrons for your support. You can join them and help to support me and my channel going forward. All of the information can be found at the new Patreon that I've set up. The link is in the description below. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.